mother, wife,
Air Force veteran,
gun rights advocate.
This is Stacy on the Right. Here's your host, Stacy Washington.
The best of the best of the best. That's all we have for you here on Stacy on the Right. And I am so excited to be chatting with our next guest, Kate Monroe, veteran advocate, CEO of VETCOMM, at VETCOMM US on Twitter. Kate, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
I'm so thankful that you're having me. Excited.
You know, I'm excited too because one of the subjects that we delve in and out of here on the program is homelessness, and specifically veteran homelessness. I think it's a travesty for people to go into U.S. Armed Forces and to serve honorably and then come home, and then for whatever reason to find themselves in a situation where they are, as the left likes to say, unhoused, and then for that to go on continually. Because I did a little bit of research into homelessness a few years back when I was writing for a local newspaper, and it turns out that when you are homeless, there are physiological changes, but there are also mental and emotional changes that kind of begin to take on a concrete form at 12 months. So someone who is homeless is not considered persistently homeless until they've been homeless for more than 12 months. And at that point, there become very, very insidious changes in the mind of that person because of their homeless status. And it's harder for them to live in a home after that. And it doesn't mean they can't live in a home, but it becomes harder for them. Physiologically, they become a little mentally ill from being homeless and the rigors of constantly protecting themselves, not having a safe place to sleep, being exposed to the elements, being exposed to other people who may already be suffering from mental illness. And so this is something that we should avoid at all costs for everyone, but specifically veterans. I think they should be at the top of our list.
Oh, I could not agree more. You know, I've visited and talked to, since May, about 1,000 homeless people from all different walks of life. You know, about 200 of them are homeless vets. And you are absolutely correct. The longer that we leave people in the state that they're in, you know, we like to say that they're camping. I've been camping. That what they are doing is not camping. It doesn't even meet the camping standard. I mean, a lot of these people, like I actually took a guy off the street. He had one leg. I reunited him with his family. It took us putting him in a hotel already 3 weeks before we could convince him to get in the shower. And when he got in the shower, he tried to get right out, just the water hitting his skin. So, you know, when you live in a state of constant scarcity and desperation, it will alter your mind. So, yeah, we leave people on the street too long. Circumstantially homeless people, I would argue we got to get them off the street even before 90 days, things start to change.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great point for you to make, Kate, because when you say 90 days, I mean, you know, in our regular everyday lives where, you know, I come here every night and I sleep and I rest and I don't worry about being safe here, it doesn't really even, you know, it doesn't count to me in my calendarized life. 90 days is nothing. It seems like I can blink my eyes and 90 days will come and go. It's the opposite of that. It's like living in slow motion, living on the streets, being unhoused, being exposed to the elements, being exposed to people who will rob you, rape you, you know, beat you up for no reason at all other than they know you don't have any place to go, and constantly being exposed to law enforcement and other, you know, official individuals telling you you can't sit there, you can't sleep there, you have to move along, move along, move along, move along. It's just an unbelievably dastardly way for someone to live. And you're right, 90 days of that, I'm not sure I could handle it. And these are people who are, they're working, they're trying to get out of there.
That's the market where people, you know, if they weren't on drugs before, that's the mark where they start thinking, you know what, I might sleep tonight if I took this pill. I might be able to get some rest if I got on this drug. It's very easy at around that mark. I've interviewed, like I said, about 1,000 people. That's about how long it takes for them to get into the drug scene. And then once in the drug scene, depending on the drug of choice, getting them off the street then is very, very difficult, whether they're a veteran or a non-veteran. But, I mean, certainly what goes on in San Diego's homeless population, I just visited the Tenderloin. I've been up to L.A. It's just a systemic failure by our state, by our government to have grown our homeless industrial complex and grown our homeless population because we are somehow now capitalizing on it, and we've made it an industry, and it's just disgusting and wrong.
It is. So let's talk a little bit about your organization, you have the work that you're doing is to lower the number of people who are experiencing this. First, tell us how did your organization VETCOMM come to be, and what do you do specifically?
So we have VETCOMM, which is our for-profit business, but VETCOMM supports the charity arm of what we do, and that is called housetheheroes.org. That's our initiative of getting people rated that are in transitionary housing so that they can get all of their VA compensation to transition with. Because transitionary housing, for veterans doesn't last forever. It's a program that you have to get in and out of. So our goal is to get them all their claims made and get them through the process so they can get paid before they get out so they have money to transition with. That's what our nonprofit does. But VETCOMM itself is a publicly traded company. We trade under the symbol CEOS, but we get veterans, all veterans, their disability benefits typically in under 90 days. So, for instance, if you are a veteran listening now and you aren't collecting any money, 90 days from now, you could be $1,000 to $3,000 a month richer. That's what we do. We make claims. We prepare veterans to go meet the VA's very adversarial process. I'm a Marine Corps veteran myself. I'm at 100%, but it took me 18 years doing it myself to get there, and people don't have that bandwidth. I hate to say this, but veterans will bail easily when confronted with BS. The second they think that you are trying to take from them and you don't want to pay them, they will abandon trying to get paid. And it's $1 trillion issue in the country. So I looked at it and I just said, if it took me 18 years and I am a pretty smart cookie and I'm a doer and I get things done, and it was that hard for me, how hard is it for everyone else? I've got generals and admirals rated for their disability compensation, and they couldn't even handle the process. So that's why I formed VETCOMM, to help veterans, no matter if they're 99 years old or if they're 19 years old, get every nickel that they're owed from the VA.
Wow. And I know a little bit about it from personal experience with my dad, who is he's an Army vet, and he has a service-rated disability rating, and it took him years. He just kind of said, well, the process is difficult, but he had some buddies who were in with him who they actually served together in numerous locations. And, of course, he served in combat, so he knew that there was a need there, and they just kind of had a tiny little support group for each other, and they just worked through it. And they didn't really have any help. They would just, if they had a little bit of success, they would share it, and they shared tips with each other. And it took him a couple of decades to get it done. But, you're correct. The majority of our veterans are not going to dedicate that kind of time to it. They don't have it.
Well, yeah. They don't have the time. If you're still part of the workforce, sometimes people go, well, I could just go do it for free. I go, okay, well, that's true. Well, if you were going to, where would you go? They don't really know. They just think like, well, there's free people out there. And I like to say, sir, you've been out for 30 years. It's been free the whole time. Why didn't you go do it in the last 30 years? Well, it's a hassle. Okay. Well, I'm trying to make it not a hassle for you. And I'm giving you surety that you will win. Because, I just got interviewed earlier today, and we were talking about homeless vets and how they end up being homeless. Well, they end up being homeless a lot of times in the moment they transition from active duty service to civilian life. They were never budgeting the whole time they were in, a lot of them, and they don't have the funds to transfer with. It's like, okay, thanks for your service, now get out. Like, what if you were a tank mechanic last week? What are you going to do in the civilian world as a tank mechanic, right? So then you're going to try to retool your whole set of skills, and you're going to run out of runway financially before you get there and start sleeping in a shelter. It doesn't take that long to get kicked back out to the street. And we fail our veterans. We don't rehabilitate their mental health. We don't transition their skills out into the world very well. And we fail our veteran community. I don't know if you know this, but there's 1.5 million veterans at the brink of homelessness. And in the brink of homelessness is people sleeping in their cars and in shelters. They only count you as homeless if you're sleeping actually on the street. 1.5 million people are at the brink of homelessness that served our country.
Wow. These are absolutely astounding numbers.
It's a ludicrous number. Then people just go, well, is the problem even solvable? It's so many damn people. Where do we start?
Right. And also there's a sense of like it's a problem that can't be solved. That's what people feel
Yeah.
like. They're like, oh, well, I can't help that.
People think that the whole homeless issue can't be solved. I mean, like if you look at the numbers, the homeless population for veterans was on a downward tick at around 11%. Well, this year it went up 7%. So that's actually an 18% delta. That's an 18% increase because it didn't go down by the 11, right? It actually went north and went up 7%. 18% new. So I had to do some research, and it turns out, I talked to Bob Carey, who's a retired naval captain, who is the chairman of the Natural Defense PAC, and he told me, he goes, Kate, unequivocally, the reason it went up for the most part is that all of the VA HUD-VASH funds are being allocated to migrants. Because the VA doesn't monitor it, they give it out as grant money, and that grant money is being used to house migrants. So not only do migrants get seen, 161,000 of them, before veterans at VA hospitals, they also are circumventing their right to sleep indoors through the VA HUD-VASH program, and now we have even more veterans outside.
So the illegal alien issue actually impacts our veterans. I mean, it's
billions of dollars worth.
Unbelievable.
Billions.
Unbelievable. And if Americans knew this, if it was on the 6 p.m. news, they would be outraged.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've actually been on, national broadcast news talking about, us seeing migrants in VA hospitals. I just learned this last week. You're one of the first, shows that's going to get to break this. But the VA HUD-VASH program has almost all the funds have been allocated to migrants, and it's only going to continue to get worse. So all that's going to happen is they're going to throw more money out from the VA to the HUD-VASH program, and they're still going to spend it on migrants.
Which, again, people who aren't supposed to be here.
Yeah, people that are not supposed to be here. I mean, we have millions of people in our country now. In the infrastructure economically in these cities doesn't support it. I mean, Texas shipped San Diego 40,000 migrants by bus just in the last couple of months. San Diego is not a city that can afford to house or clothe or feed 40,000 people. We just can't do it. You're seeing the same thing, in cities like San Francisco, same thing, all the way over in New York. The country cannot continue to allow this onslaught of illegal aliens crossing our border. And
why do you think it is that there's been so little backlash against this? Because it seems like veterans would be storming the gates, there'd be protests, there'd be something when you see the money going from the allocation that's theirs to these people.
Well, twofold. I mean, I would say 75% of the veteran population doesn't know it's happening. And then you overlap that with the general sentiment of veterans. Well, that's just how it is. I got screwed over in the service. I've been screwed over by the VA. Our country seems to have no will to build a wall to stop drugs and lawlessness. Why would I suddenly think they're going to do something about this? It's almost like hot potato when you're little. It's like, well, I'm going to abandon even thinking about that because there's nothing I can do to affect it. And they give up. They just give up on it and go, well, I guess this is what it is. I mean, when you're in the military and you get hurt, they could break your leg and they would give you 2 Motrin and tell you to dirt it off and walk on. So it's not that surprising that they carry that out into the rest of their life.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about more of the solutions. I mean, obviously, the government is a huge part of solving homelessness for veterans, but the private sector also plays a role here. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, so here, I'm going to give you my solution first because like I said, I've talked to 1,000 homeless people. I've talked to people that are in and adjacent to the problem that are part of the homeless industrial complex that feeds off it. I've done this whole year. I've been researching this. I really think, as a Marine Corps veteran, knowing what a FOB is, a forward operating base, I think we should build a base camp. It would cost 10% of what it costs to house, and I'm air quotes here, house people in this transitionary housing, this housing first model that doesn't transform people. It just puts people inside so they can just kill themselves with drugs. If you built a base camp, you could bucketize people into why they are homeless. If you're recently homeless, we need to get you. You probably got robbed. We're going to get your driver's license back, get your resume going, get you out looking for jobs, get you ready to transition. You're recently homeless and you can have a job. We're going to employ you and put you in housing. But if you have been on drugs for 20 years, you are not going from your tent directly inside to kill yourself. You're going to base camp, and if it takes you a year to get clean, it takes a year. There's no 28-day program that's going to clean up a 20-year addict or a 2-year addict. It just is not going to happen. So we can bucketize them, figure out why they are homeless. If they're homeless because of their mental health, we're going to try to get them on meds, get them cleaned up, get them into a program with purposeful work. This base camp would have large hooch-style tents with bunks. There would be shower systems, cafeteria, chapel, commissary. Everybody thinks that homeless people don't have any money. The average homeless person in San Diego gets $1,600 a month. They just spend all of it on drugs and junk food. That's why they're sleeping outside. So I really think base camp
doesn't go to
is the
housing.
solution.
It doesn't go to housing at all. The $1,600 they're getting doesn't go to housing. So how do they get the money? It's on a card that they carry around?
It gets auto deposited onto their card, and God forbid they get robbed, because then they got to wait to get that card back, and somebody probably took it and spent all the money that was on it. I mean, these people get, like in San Diego, I talked to a young Army veteran, and she had been assaulted 4 times in just a couple months on the street. Every single person had been robbed. 45 people are dead on San Diego streets and get scooped up by a truck every month. It's like a third world country down in the bottoms. It's absolutely crazy. It's as bad, if not worse, than the Tenderloin.
45 people a month?
A month. OD. And the homeless people are tasked with taking them out to the middle of the street and putting them in the middle of the street so in the dead of night they can get scooped up by a truck. Just me personally, I have stepped over a homeless person walking down the street thinking they were asleep, trying not to wake them up, and on my way back down the block, their body's getting bagged up. You could be a citizen in San Diego and step over a dead body unknowingly. It's crazy, and nobody does anything about it because there's so much money at stake keeping the problem going. Because you got to think about the thousands of people, all these civilian organizations that get all this grant money. Well, if we actually cured homelessness, that money would go away. No one has the financial will to want to stop it. The second we made homelessness an industry for people to feed off of, we made an almost insurmountable problem of fixing it. Because the solution is very simple, just like the solution with the border. Go build the wall and reform immigration. It's not rocket science. But we make it very difficult because there's so much money to be made off of it.
Well, I think there's a bit of a, people turn away from problems that are persistent, that, you kind of get the feeling there's nothing that can be done about this. And
yeah, but
I think
it totally
that
can be done. You could declare
absolutely.
a national disaster. FEMA could come build one of these base camps in 5 days, and you could just go, oh yeah, by the way, we're also going to turn on law enforcement. So now you're going to go to base camp or you're going to jail. All 1,000 people said I would go to base camp right now because if I could be there long enough, I could get clean.
So talk to us about, and you've mentioned a little bit, but I want to cement this in the minds of our listeners. When you say base camp can be built in that short amount of time, give us the 5 things that have to happen for a base camp to be stood up in San Diego.
So first you would need to find some land, which I've talked to a lot of landowners. They would do what's called subventing their land. So they might get, paid something by the state, local, or federal government for you to utilize their open land. It would need to be run for electricity and water, but most of the land here in San Diego, anywhere near a city, has already been, already has utilities essentially. So you would need to find a piece of land, which would be easy. You would need to declare a state of emergency, which this is definitely an emergency. This is a health environmental crisis for our city. Declare an emergency. You could get the National Guard to come. They would get deployed here, and we already own the equipment to make a base camp, to make these fobs. All of this stuff, all these tents, all the cafeterias, all the shower units already exist in warehouses on bases being not utilized. Easily, they could build it. Like, to give you an idea, we build forward operating bases in other countries in less than 3 days. We can even build a whole runway for an airport in 3 days. our military can. There's all this wasted equipment. That is what it would take. And then you would have to force the services, because there would be no homeless people on the street that they don't visit anyway. Now all the services who get all this money would have to go ring around this base camp. And it would be very simple. You would just say, now there's performance-based funding. So if you're not doing anything auditable by your first, every quarter you get new funds released. If you haven't done the thing you said you would do, well, you don't get your next deposit. And half of these people will go away. Half of the waste in the homeless industrial complex would go away overnight, because when I go visit people, I say, who visited you last? And they say, you did 3 weeks ago. There's hundreds of people that are supposedly helping people here in San Diego, and I'm the last person that visited these people in 3 weeks. So what is everyone else doing with all their money? Well, they're putting a fence up in a parking lot and putting 5 tents there, and they took in $1 million to do that. So where did the other $950,000 go?
$1 million. I mean, this is criminal.
The amount of money that our city has spent on the Safe Camping Initiative is millions, and we literally put a fence around the operational yards parking lot and put some tents out in the middle of it. And for 2 months, there wasn't even a shower system. They were like, look what we built. I'm like, a high school class could have built that.
So I think the big deal here is, first of all, stopping the thing that is the waste, stopping the fraud, and then getting into what I would consider to be a mode of accountability. And I think you're talking about that as you're mentioning, the people who, if you have the services ringed about the base camp, then there's no room for individuals to, put up 5 tents and collect $1 million. I mean, that's a racket.
Well,
it's an unbelievable
you can't
racket.
hide. You can't hide, because everyone's going to be like, oh, where's the people that are supposed to be here doing the IDs? They haven't seen them in a week. Oh, yeah, well, they got fired because they don't actually do IDs for people. So now that money's going to go to someone who does. See, it's not private industry that does that. That's a myth. This is all a bunch of, charities, 501c3s that get started by public officials' families so they can basically launder money. If you look at who actually owns the buildings that get bought and refurbished to put people in so they can collect these vouchers, it's almost always someone that the city officials know. It's some giant, corporation that gets paid all this money. I mean, I hate to, shed a light on this in such a nasty way, but it is nasty. And until people understand that, most of the funds spent by the government go to line other people's pockets, nothing will change.
Well, we're going to see exactly what happens. I think there's a real opportunity here for Americans to join alongside you and help. And so that brings us to one of the most important parts of our chat this evening, and that is, how can people who are listening to this, who want to be a part of the solution, plug in with your organization and help?
They could find us at VETCOMM, VETCOMM.us. They can also, if they're looking at the charities, like if you're a veteran and you need help and you need to get rated, go to VETCOMM.us. If you want to help us with veteran homelessness, go to housetheheroes.org, not .com, but .org. And we didn't talk about this, but I am running for Congress in California's 49th district. And most of what I'm running on is pillars of safety, shutting the border, fixing our homeless problem, our drugs and lawlessness problem, veterans affairs, the economy. If you want to understand more about what Kate's about and what I plan to do in my station for our country, if you went to Kate4, F-O-R, so Kate4Congress.com, you could see more about what I stand for. And, if you live in my district or know someone who does, you could certainly vote for Kate.
I love it. Thank you so much for that. I love what you're doing. I love the fact that you're devoting yourself to this and that so many people will be helped because of what you are putting out there with your organization, VETCOMM. So good to talk to you. At VETCOMM US is the Twitter account. Kate Monroe, you're awesome. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you, and you have a blessed day.
You too. We'll be back with more Stacy on the Right after this. Stay right there.